Merry Christmas, everybody. Hope you're enjoying being with your family or your friends or by yourself or however it is that you're spending your holidays. Hope you're doing well. So I've been circling around this notion of like in the more I circle around it, the more important it seems to be, yet the more very elusive by definition it is, and it's the notion of ineffability. And more precisely, I would say not even that something is ineffable, but the ineffable, like the being that is ineffable, if we will. Man, it seems to be at the heart of the matter. The more I think about it, it's at the heart of the matter in terms of how one fully participates and how identity arises out of that play of our participation and informs that participation and then necessitates the identity that then participates, right? And also the sense in which, essentially something that's ineffable is something that you can't really describe. It's like and in some sense it's an encounter in some way, an experience in some way in which I cannot find words to describe. But that there is that which to describe, but that is undescribable, right? And so it's important in this luminous way in that it's beyond. It points to this sense of beyond all that I can know, beyond all that I can describe, beyond all that I can say. And of course, this really also starts to point to the central place that we are right now, especially if we start to if we're talking about this sense of the implicit nihilism that we find ourselves in. Nothing, as in not, as in the absence of something, right? The nil, the nihil, is very different in the sense of, say, something like sunyata, right? Or the notion of emptiness, which it basically kind of points to that there's no identity you can assign to something. It's empty of identity all the way down, yet it's also simultaneously full of the openness, right? Which is beyond identity. So there is this way in which it seems like if we look at our own lives, if my relationship to that which is beyond the horizon, that which is beyond comprehension, which is beyond the sayable, and yet I have a pre-thematic and perhaps even a thematic relationship to that ineffability, that beyondness, right? That moreness. It can be one of moreness. It can be one in which calls me forth into all the particular things that I could say, but it'll have those particulars show up in a way that's consistent with that kind of openness, I think. It'll shine forth the moreness, right? It'll, an open hand, a letting appear, versus a grasping attention, right? Because if there's just things, and those things don't mean anything, they don't point to anything beyond themselves. And if I don't point to anything beyond myself, right, where does one find any locus of fully participating in that world, right? So there's this connection, I think, between deep participation that in some way prehends, right? Already, you could say, reaches out and extends to the world and presences that ineffability, that moreness, such that the individual beings before me shine forth in something I want to get closer with. Their particulars draw me in, but then draw beyond them and give me a sense, both give me a sense of self that is motivated to participate, right? Yet, at the same time, if we look at, what are the barriers that come up oftentimes with us, right? With human beings, right? With the one watching this video, with the one making this video right now, what are the barriers that come into fully participating in that way that is generative of the world and the self in that generation of the world generation? It's itself and opens each other, mutually disclosing each other, right? So we call that, like, in the ultimate sense, fully participating, right? What gets in the way of that? I have to say, my experience of just, talking deeply with a lot of people, very deeply about their lives, man, is at the bottom of it. And there are places where most human beings, like, they're kind of, whether or not they know it or not, there are places where we're like, nope, I will not do that. I do not play. I will kind of withhold myself, which of course you can't not participate. So that, the double bind of that is that, like, that it's like your way of fully participating is by withholding your participation, which just has one be strangely dyslexically emotionally constipated, right? but I think that there is a place where we innocently get oftentimes discouraged, right? Is precisely where we have this experience of being where two things that seem completely like the world wouldn't go on unless I have this or this is true, right? That if I move towards one of those things, it lets go of the other one. And if I let go of the one I have and move towards that other one I just let go of, I lose that one, right? Classic situation is this sense of, in relationships. It's like where, I don't want to move deeper into the relationship because I want to maintain my sense of self, right? But also I want the relationship. So, but if I have the relationship, then I lose myself, and I can't lose myself. So I'll hold on to myself, but if I hold on to myself, I lose the relationship, which diminishes myself, right? Or this sense of oftentimes, I would imagine this is at the heart of what, like, is often very traumatizing. But what I'm getting at is not necessarily trauma per se, but what I'm getting at is that life can, these levels of being, right? These levels of context that you could say have the world show up in the terms that they do, right? Can be very one of deep double binds, and these anticipating these double binds, avoiding these double binds, wrestling with these double binds they're not problems. That's one of the things I really appreciate about Gregory Bateson's work. He did a lot of work in double binds, and he showed that double binds are what is at the bottom of schizophrenia. Or he postulated that, at least. And it's also the place in which he noted that geniuses, at the same time, geniuses often were geniuses at precisely solving double binds, right? So and I think he held open that there's something unique about double binds, but they're not problems. That's one of the things he talked about. Like a problem is a problem by virtue of it is possible to be solved, right? Like you may not know how to solve it, you may not be capable of solving it, but like in terms of existence and possibility, it's possible to be solved. A double bind is not a problem, right? Because it's by definition, right, it's not possible to solve. Right? So what happens when the world shows up as a double bind, right? I think there's a kind of withholding, and that withholding, right, happens most likely at the level of the heart and at the level at which I participate. So to participate in my life as a withholding of my participation, right? And all of the feelings, the emotional constipations, right? And the frustrations and all of the mood of that, right? I think it's kind of defined by withholding. And there's a brilliance to the withholding, right? Because it does line up in the sense in which if by withholding I am acknowledging that there's that it's in some way I'm in relationship to that I can't solve it. And which is true, you can't solve a double bind. However, the issue, I believe, probably has a lot to do with this connection with the ineffable, right? This sense of the ultimate, right? This sense of what is at the top of